My name is Shauna Stefanczyk, and today we would like to go over our curriculum management tool with you and how you could best utilize that for your district. If you've purchased our management tool, first, we just want to say thank you. We hope that it provides you with a clarity and consistency needed for curriculum, and we hope that you find the process much easier than the past. So I've introduced myself to you before. My name is Shauna Stefanczyk. I am the president of Step Up Consulting, and a little bit on the screen gives a bit about my past. And this really, my past leads into the why of the curriculum management tool that you're using today. I was in the curriculum office when Common Core came and went, and I saw just how difficult the curriculum development process was for teachers. So I made it my goal to simplify that. So the goal of a curriculum management tool is to create pacing guides that are aligned to priority standards. They are a process in which during curriculum you have work time, but actually feedback on the work that you're doing. And then we always like for teams to debrief and discuss their next steps after every work session. So at this time, I'm going to just give a break. If you need any introductions in your team, you're probably watching this video and you are very well acquainted with the people you're with, so you can skip that over that. I want to give you the vision of the work we're doing. So not only are we getting a management tool in place, we're also deepening our understanding of the DESE priority standards. These tools are set up to expedite the curriculum development process, but to also clarify for you what standards were chosen as DESE priorities, or our company added a few that we feel the state left out. But they will really help you clarify what those priorities are and help you see the difference between priority and supporting standards. You have a lot of standards to cover, so it's always important to know which ones are going to be those big headers that are going to show up on the state assessment and which ones are standards we just need to cover. And so the next step in the work you're going to be engaging in is creating pacing guides to pace those priority standards in a way that you have a clear roadmap of how to do that throughout the year. Once pacing guides are in place, our company typically recommends doing assessments next to help you backward design what the clarity of those priority standards and how they should be assessed should look like. We think that's a great part of the system. And then after you know what you're teaching, how you're assessing, this also helps you with this grade card alignment piece. Whatever you're grading should be aligned to what you're assessing and prioritizing. So they all kind of flow together, and this might help give you an idea of where your district is going with this work. And why we came up with this tool, when we talk about guaranteed curriculum, Robert Maranzano says the guarantee is that every student is provided an opportunity to learn a core curriculum that provides them with the probability of success in school. In Missouri, that is the Missouri Learning Standards. Our state adopted that as our guarantee for every student to have equity across the state. They will be exposed and assessed on the Missouri Learning Standards. That's the guarantee. So if we don't have a full plan, and if you've been relying on a resource rather than being standards focused, that may not be happening, and you may not be offering a guaranteed curriculum. And then he talks about a viable curriculum, and that is to make sure you have the necessary time available to teach those standards. Well, that's why the state went and prioritized those. You're in charge of a lot of standards. So they tried to prioritize though, but this guaranteed and viable curriculum thought is exactly why we have developed the pacing guides. It guarantees we're teaching the standards, and it gives you a viability plan of how to do that throughout the year. It's important for you to realize that while the state came out with priority standards, you'll notice on our templates, sometimes in English language arts, we've added a few more. We feel there were some they left off. So just know there's no more than 1 or 2 per grade level, but there are some additional ones. The goal of our company is to really help you not feel like this blurry hamster on a wheel on your screen, that we're wanting to make this process feel expedited and smooth for you. So our first step today is going to be creating a clear and organized system. If you have a particular resource that you love using, then we would recommend pacing it, and here's a copy of our pacing guide on the right, we would say have your resource, your assessment book handy, and we're going to encourage you to look within your resource and find what priority and supporting standards are taught within each unit and align your pacing guide to that. We want those two to talk, but overall, we want to make sure that you have this plan on the right of your state standards and how you're going to meet those. So those are materials you'll need for today. If you have a correlation guide where your textbook tells you here are specific standards that are covered and assessed in this unit, that will help you in developing that. So you'll want to have that with you. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually pace your priorities. So you can see on this screen, it shows we're going to identify units, run down each column. What is a priority in this unit? The pink is the priority written in student-friendly language. And then what are those supporting standards that I'm also covering during that unit? Then after we get your priorities and supporting into that, we're ultimately creating is this goal 3 of a landing page where we will link all resources and everything to this page. This is becoming a management tool. It's a one-stop shop for you, getting away from a million folders and not being able to know where to find things. We want you to have this spreadsheet where everything you need is clearly understandable of how you're going to do it, and everything you need will be linked to this page. So in the next coming weeks or months, you might find yourself coming back to here and linking those things. Here's an exemplar of a pacing guide filled out completely. You'll notice the units across the top. If you're using a resource, they can be named after your unit. You'll also notice that it's got the pacing about how many weeks you think it will take and what quarter. And you'll notice that there are assessments because we want those hyperlinked right in here. And then your ICANN and priority standards. Here's where your supporting standards. Do you notice how some run all the way across? There are some supporting things like writing text legibly that you're going to be hitting and talking about. You're not assessing it. It's not a priority, but that we're going to be making a concerted effort to always talk about those things. And then the ones that lie just within the certain boxes are those that maybe you're going to just cover quotation marks really heavily within 2 units. You'll notice there's some priorities under supporting because sometimes we teach priorities, but we're not assessing them. So when that happens, they lie in the supporting area, but it helps you distinguish, hey, this is a big deal, but I'm not assessing it in this unit. So that's just an overview of these 2 slides of how a finished pacing guide might look. You're going to have some standards run all the way across because I'm assessing them every unit. Others you're going to have isolated. Sometimes they might repeat. And the same with supporting. Some run all the way across, but keep in mind when they're in supporting, you are covering and you're not systematically assessing those. So here's what's going to make the process easy for you today. We're going to give you this sheet. It has 2 tabs. On one tab, it will have DESE standards. It's all the MLS you're responsible for teaching, but we have gone ahead and color-coded the priority for you. And we recommend the first step, going in and assessing where would my priority standards, where would I expect my students to be proficient in that standard? And then you're going to copy and paste that into the template. You'll also notice that they're hyperlinked. If your district bought the proficiency scales to go with those, then you're in good shape because you also have an amazing tool hyperlinked right in. But step 1 is you're going to go through every unit and you're going to start with every priority standard and decide what unit would I paste that into to be proficient. So we could do some examples here together. If we looked at this 3rd grade standard, describe the personality traits of characters from their thoughts, words, and actions. As a 3rd grade teacher talking about where do we think they would go in the tool. And now read the second one, describe interaction, including relationships and how they change. So 2 thoughts come to my mind. And you can have some discussion if you want to pause the video now and talk with your team. But the first thing is we could teach one of these in Unit 2. We could begin talking about personality traits, thoughts, words, and actions. I think of a lot of great anchor charts we could use to do that. And then the following unit, you could build upon that and talk about how a character's traits and thoughts really impact the types of relationships and how they change over time. Or you could put these two priority standards together and you could do a big characterization unit of how personality traits lead into relationships. So it really depends if you have a resource. How does your resource do it? Where does it assess it? Does it do these two at the same time or does it spread it out? That might impact how you pace them. Or you could put them in congruent units and understand how they build off of each other. One tool you'll have at your tables with you most likely is either a map book or a vertical progression. You could look up the character trait strand and see how these standards build to give you an idea of where to pace those. But the big thing to notice about these two standards is that they probably are standalone. They're not ones that you're going to teach and assess in every unit. They're either going to stand alone on their own in a unit or they're going to be taught together in a unit. So go ahead and pause the video now and talk about where would you place these standards if this was your grade level. This next slide, I want to show you an example of how you might pace your standards. So notice this says priority standards, and you've got some running all the way across. Here we have R1D and R1B, which are read independently for multiple periods of time and produce evidence of reading. You'll notice they're not hyperlinked to a proficiency tool because you'll be doing that through informal running records. But you'll notice it runs across every unit. The state does not say it's a priority. Step Up Consulting did. So we would highly recommend that, especially at K through 5, you have that in every unit and you're monitoring it through informal running records. And we have it running across there because we want teachers to remember in every unit, you need to be informally or formally assessing, are your students reading independently appropriate text? You'll also notice there's a speaking and listening standard across there. Now, if you'll click on that, it's actually hyperlinked to a checklist. There are certain speaking and listening tools or standards that you're going to be teaching every unit. This is a priority according to the state. It won't be on an assessment, but it would be a checklist to make sure that kids are staying on topic and can link to each other's. So when you look at the priority standards, you're constantly deciding, is this one I'm going to assess every unit? Or is it going to live in a certain unit like the other ones we have here? For instance, distinguish point of view from the narrator and those of other characters. This teacher said this could come early on, that they're talking about point of view. And keeping in mind when it's in the priority section, that means you're going to be creating an assessment over it. And the next unit, unit 3, you'll notice unit 1 is blank because that's a lot of review. And if we looked at the pacing at the top, it was probably only a couple of weeks. And so that's okay to not have anything there. They started with point of view next. And now we've moved on to summarize and including some text media in there. So this is going to help. This is actually, as I look at this, is summarizing, sequencing, and talking about how past impacts future events. I know I'm probably going to see cause and effect under supporting standards. And this is a pretty lofty one to put at unit 3. So I'm going to assume that this teacher has a strong unit or the resource has a strong unit on really diving into summarizing here. I also find it interesting here. They have cause and effect. Oops. I almost would think, sorry, my screen is, I would almost suggest to this teacher putting cause and effect with this unit, because that would be a skill you're going to be using to judge past and future events. And I might also suggest they wait till later on in the unit. You'll see here they put their personality traits, thoughts, words, and characters and relationships in the same unit. So they're going to do characterization. This has drawn conclusions and cause and effect. Here we have read and infer text features. So see, here are some suggestions I would have here for this teacher. I would switch the standards in this column where it starts with text features and point of view. I would flip that if it were not um, opposed to my resource and make that prior to drawing conclusions and cause and effect, because the understanding text features is going to help them more find that evidence for drawing conclusions. And if you use the vertical progressions, you'll see that happens before. So I might suggest some changing in here. But overall, this is the type of thinking you're going to need to do when you're looking at your priority standards, is determining, what does my priority need to be assessed all the way along? Or do I want to assess that in a certain unit, align it with my resource? Or is there a progression I think would make most sense? At the end of developing these pacing guides, we would recommend you look at everything in the priority standard and turn that into an assessment. So you really want to be thoughtful in thinking the best way that your standards progress. Here's a writing example. You'll notice how pre-writing goes all the way across, sentence type, um, capitalizing names and places. There's certain things you're going to look for students at all the time. And then within the units, you're going to see at the beginning, we're really working on narratives. By third quarter, you're going into more specific genre of opinion writing, etc. So the step one that you're going to be doing as a group, if you have a resource, you're going to be looking at an item correlation. 2, you're going to identify the priority standards within each unit and do that process I talked about, and thinking about how would you group those. And last, you're going to determine the unit that those priority standards should live in. Remember, not all priority standards should be assessed. The language standards are broad. And speaking and listening, you may consider pacing in a different way. Your documents are going to be separated into 3 things: reading comprehension, reading foundations, and writing and language. So as you're doing this work, those are housed in separate pieces. At this time, we're going to release you to do that work time. And I hope looking at some of the exemplars on this screen and talking through some of the process will help you get started.